Bulunaka, welcome to Fiji BC, a four-part video podcast series that aims to take a deep dive into what Fiji was like before westernized contact. The purpose of the show was actually put together because I was kind of curious about how Fiji was back in the day, and instead of going through, PDFs and documents, because I have a short attention span, can't be bothered reading. I want to hear it, straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And our guest today is none other than Mr. Sevudredre, who's our episode this time around is spirituality. What were Fijians like? What was their spiritual life like pre-contact in the BC period? So it's funny, like when we discuss spirituality, I actually wanted to say religion, but you said spirituality is a bit better because it runs the gamut of how Fijians treated the supernatural and how they worked with it. In saying that, it's a bit interesting because talking about that kind of thing today, with how Fiji is a Christian, majority Christian people, talking about how Fijians were spiritually back then, it's almost like it's a bit like scary to think about aspects of that, because it's almost like it seems like it's like voodoo or like black magic or like some kind of scary. Fijians used to do lots of scary things back then, but you and I are here today to get to the heart of the matter and to figure out exactly what they got up to spirituality wise, and how it's actually not it's not that much different from it's not actually all like like in the scary movies where they bring up ancient curses and whatnot, and it's definitely a lot more. I think by going into this topic, I think we aim to demystify the past, especially with concerns with relations to how we lived spiritually. And so I guess the first question is, what was life like back then with regards to how spirituality or how religion was interwoven through the fabric of society? We've touched a bit on that on the previous episode about how the Mbetes were pretty much infused through every aspect of every layer of society. We had the gang at the top, the main priest, and then we had the individual priests for different roles. So we had the priest for the military guys, we had the priest for the craftsmanship, and so on and so forth. So if you could just take a step back and just talk about what is the general overview of how Fijians treated how they ran the so-called the religious lives. So I keep saying religious, not religious, spiritual lives.
Well, it's hard to come out of the lens that we had been subjected to for 2 centuries. And the word Lotu is actually a Tongan word.
Okay.
Religion.
Shout out to all the Tongans watching, and to Mom.
But the word for spirituality, the indigenous word here is Sokalo.
Sokalo.
So the root word is the Kalo. Sokalo is the spirituality.
Isn't Kalo like also like
there's a capital K, there's a small k.
Oh, okay. And the capital K being
the one who's supreme.
Right.
But then that's trying to fit everything into one neat little box. There's no one supreme. Whatever is supreme in tribe A is not supreme in tribe D.
Oh, okay.
Yes, again, that shows
with the segmentation of culture.
But the basic spirituality then is ancestor worship. This was a term used by Basil Thompson. He was one of the commissioners for the Native Lands Commission. he used the term ancestor worship. I'd rather tweak it a little and say instead of ancestor worship, there was ancestor veneration.
Veneration, okay.
When an ancestor, for when someone dies, they become venerated, not worship. Worship brings all the little rituals and all the do's and don'ts. Veneration is more like creating the person to become sacred. It's a very fine line. Sacred.
Also, like you could think of them as sort of like kept in the thoughts of the descendants.
Yes.
You know, kind of like how you have the picture of your great grandfather and all, and you talk about them often, and you keep them alive in your memories, so to speak.
Yes. So over time, and a person, a forefather, becomes elevated to a deity, a small deity in a household or in a small clan. And this is how society was. Ancestor veneration. The more ancestors, in fact, there were more deities than tribes.
Must have been a headache keeping track of.
No one has been able to document all the deities because deities also have their shelf life.
Oh, okay.
They also have a purpose. Yeah.
When you say shelf life, sort of like the popularity or how
Their function,
okay,
their relevance. There are those who have more continual relevance. There are those who are summoned just for a particular purpose and a particular function, and they are asked to go back.
Oh, okay. Kind of like how, you know, if I want to do well at a job interview, I call on.
You'd call on a certain pharmacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
So that's spirituality. In the traditional pre-contact arrangement of society, it was interesting to note that we had sorcerers. They were called Dawakanraunikau. And the sorcerers, they had no place in society. They were ostracized. They were not allowed to mix with everyone. They were shunned.
Oh.
They were exiled. Do not come in and live with us.
Sort of like monks.
No.
Oh.
They were shunned.
Not allowed. Oh, so how monks are okay to come travel?
Yeah.
Or they were not allowed.
These are the sorcerers were the ones who used and abused the spiritual power for their personal gain.
Oh.
The community accessed the spiritual power through the gatekeepers, the oracle priests.
And for the benefit of.
Yes, that was the key difference. They were both going to the same safe, but one was digging to the same safe for his personal selfish gain, but the others were using it for betterment of the community.
So when you say those who were found out to be using the power for their spiritual gain, they were kicked out. What is the I think you told me this before. That was known that was sort of termed as black magic, as like
That's
forbidden magic. Oh, okay.
So they even had their way of regulating. The ones who are using power for selfish means and ends were cast out of society.
What is the term given to them?
The sorcerers.
Oh. And for the priests?
The priests were never seen as sorcerers.
Right.
They were the gatekeepers. They only gave the right dose of mana to whoever was asking, and for whatever purpose they were asking. Whether you're doing a canoe, whether you're going to battle, they gave the dose. And when it was done, this is why in the spirituality, whatever was done, there's always a thank you, acknowledgement to hand back the power.
So it's never a one-way thing where it's almost like an economy of mana where it flowed back and forth to ensure the well-being of the society.
Sustaining the society.
Right. So it was never like pay me and then that's it. It was always it is like lending the mana to ensure that once you're done you hand it back and then that's really interesting. That's an interesting way to view.
There's a risk.
Oh, okay.
The same deities, they can be summoned for dark purposes by the sorcerers or by someone who has an evil intent and wants to go his own her way. So what I'm saying is, society, everything has to be done for the collective good.
Community.
Community.
Right. Because that's the way the societal structure was in general. Like, everything was for the benefit of the vanua, for the clan, for the. So everyone works together so that everyone is okay. Everyone works together so that everyone comes out.
Everyone works together, so there's a balance.
Right.
There's a balance of power borrowed from the spiritual world to ensure the sustaining of the temporal, the physical world.
And that extends towards all those various roles.
Yeah.
Like we were saying in the previous episode, how everybody goes in about their normal life, day-to-day life, but then when they were called, they would stand up and fulfill the particular role that needed to be filled. So the same thing with the spirituality aspect. Okay, that's really fascinating. So, like, we have that the whole how mana works. So the deities who give the mana. Let's talk about
deities. There's a big list, but I just have a small list.
Basically, we'll talk about what you know.
Okay.
What we what you can talk about the type of deities and who are they.
If you were a conquering chief or you are a new chief, you came into the clan with your deities.
As in, if you came in from a different clan,
if you
bring your own
deity, and you just run all the existing deities out of the clan, because they will be in conflict with you. You have your own agenda, and you bring your own oracle priests and your deities.
So that means, spirituality-wise, it's tied to the top. It's tied to the chief and the executive community.
It's tied to the chief in the sense this would become the main deity of that
for the community.
The rest, they still have their own little.
Oh, I see.
Their little muses, their little guides.
Right. And those were very personal to them, to their family, and it goes back to the ancestor. Veneration. I was going to say vulnerability. No, veneration. But okay. So that's an interesting way to show to explain how. So it could change with each if a new chief was brought in from outside, and
yes, it could change. It could also change if a little subgroup in a clan decides to detach and go away. They also take their gods with them, their deities, because it's an extension of ancestor veneration. They are connected to the people who venerate through blood. If you're from subgroup B, you can't come and summon the deity in subgroup A because they operate on blood. The ancestors will only respond to his own.
Right. There's no way you could access that because you can't.
You can't borrow.
Right. So with regards to the deities that you're speaking of, what type of? I know they actually. You have deities that were specific to families, but then you have deities that are specific to, I guess, the chiefs.
Yeah.
Did they ever extend to like deities that were worshipped by like, say, a bigger collective like Matangali or province, or like, were they a bit more popular gods that like everyone?
They are what they will call the district. I'm using a very Western term. District gods. But when I say district, I'm thinking of a large clan, going over mountains, and they're still the same clan. There were gods of harvest. There were gods of fishing. The key basic roles.
Activities, right?
There were gods of war, and there were also gods of the underworld, and there were also because society was hierarchical, arranged in an order. The gods too were arranged in an order.
Oh, okay. So we can actually
whoever was the main kingpin, his god is the main.
The main one. So the gods were tied within the arena of a clan. The gods and the tier level were tied to the chief. So he'd bring in his own gods and say, would he say to the village, worship these ones?
He'll come in with his own chief priest.
and the priest would say,
So whoever's the old order chief priest, he's demoted.
"Oh, okay." Curious question: how often are the chiefs? I don't want to say swapped out, but how often does a new chief come in? Not often. I assume that this is
The selection of chiefs was done on merit. Today we have chiefs. You are born into the society and the status, but pre-contact, pre-Christian chiefs, the ones who actually install chiefs, they watch and monitor their behavior. A person is brought and made a chief for a purpose. He or she must fulfill a function, a greater good in the community. If that greater good is met, good. His genealogy can continue, but the watchers, the ones who install,
the kingmakers.
the kingmakers are Salturana.
Yeah, they are the ones who.
They are the ones who determine whether it continues based on performance. So if a chief does not perform,
Fired.
he's fired or his role is ends with him. They look for another one. So your priest, get out. Look for another one, bring him or her in, and he comes in with his own chief deity chief priest.
So it's like a package deal.
Yeah.
So it's funny, like, so that means, I mean, if we were to speak like specifics, the seat of power actually rests with Sauturanga.
And that's the key word. The Sau is mana, but mana at another high level. Sau. I mean, there are different words in the Pacific. It's called how. Sau is Sau. Really? Sau. Yeah. Well, not a Samoan Sau come, but it's Sau is in how mana.
Right, is distributed.
Spiritual power.
Spiritual power.
Influence. Yeah.
So taking a step back, going back to the deities, the different gods. If so, you've mentioned that there's different gods for different aspects. Let's pick one. Of
There's a god, the patron god of fishermen. He's called Dauvina.
Oh, hold on. So you're saying patron, like like how we have the patron saint of this and patron saint of that. So similar, like they have specific gods for specific things. So
Dauvina was a patron god for coastal tribes, particularly during bad weather or in the night when they couldn't see or navigate. They summoned Dauvina, and he
as in Vina, as in
that was
light.
his role, just to shine the light and to direct and clear of the reefs or the channel, the passages, etc.
That's really interesting.
At sea, he was a guide. But when he comes to land, that's when he is mischievous. He becomes the Loki, and he harasses the women, etc. And he's up to no good.
Oh, naughty boy.
Yeah.
So if we were to pick, like just pick one clan, and I guess you can speak in general terms. If you were to go down the hierarchy, if you could, state what was the most important god that everyone in the clan worshipped, and then who was the next one, and then who was the one.
Okay. Hierarchy. Before I go into hierarchy, let me go into the underworld.
Okay, that's it's
the land of the dead.
Right, the land of the dead. That is, I have to say, in terms of all aspects of Fijian culture, that is the one that I've heard about the least. I mean, we all know about how you people talk about the Dakwanga, the shark god, and the snake god, but there's very rarely any mention about the Fijian belief of the underworld. So feel free to.
The general word for the underworld is Mbulu. Underworld. Mbulu.
Literal
Mbulu.
Under the world.
But different, because of different migrations, different clans have different Mbulu. The Mbulu for those that were certain part in Bonole was Naithambavombo. Another Mbulu for another part of Bonole was Mbalaviriki.
Mbalaviriki, that one I'm familiar with.
Yep. I come to Vitilevu, there's a Mbulu underworld for those who in today's Ra province called Nakawandra. Then there's an older Mbulu, it's called Wuni Vile. This is the sunken wall. Our Atlantis, that's somewhere between Moturiki and Mbau Island. There's an underworld there. Bulu, Wuniwilevo, or some call it Davetalevo. You go to Western Fiji, in Vatulele, the Mbulu is called Valelelo, glass house. And there are similar underworlds when you go to Kandavu. You go to, so what I'm saying is, the Mbulu is actually where the chief god lives.
So it's specific to the...
Yes, the Mbulu for those in today's Lao group is Burutukula, Pulotu.
Pulotu, okay.
That's for the Moala, Matuku, Totoya, the area. So, I wouldn't want to say, but when the British colonizers came, they venerated Nakawandra as the overall, and when they say they venerated Nakawandra, they automatically made Denge, they use the word the chief of all gods. Yeah, but only for that place.
So that's how it sort of, I guess, seeped into popular culture of, when you talk about old gods, that name comes up because of that.
The key to distinguish is when people die, you ask them, where is your land of the dead? So the land of the dead then distinguishes. I had mentioned, etc. That's where the chief god is, or the deity.
All right, let's run through a scenario. What happens when a soul travels to the underworld?
There's only one documented story.
Okay.
And it's the Nakawandra documentation. When a person dies, his soul travels into the underworld for 4 days and 4 nights.
Is it ferried by?
He is looking for his journey to go into the underworld. When he reaches the underworld, he reaches a river. And in the river there is a boat. And the one who's ferrying the boat is called Wakalelealo. So Wakalelealo ferries the deceased to the other side. And when he or she, the soul, is on the other side, there is Nanga Nanga. Nanga Nanga asks, are you married or are you single? If the person is single, boo, the soul is beaten until it becomes nothing.
Whoa!
If it's a married person, I think because the world of the dead, it's sort of, it's like the Norse legends, the Valhalla, the values of the society are retold in the values. What society values is enshrined in the world of the dead.
So,
in the Valhalla, you have to be a brave soldier. You have to have your war club. You have to die with it. Otherwise, you won't enter into Valhalla as a Viking or as a Valkyrie. So that is what they carry on in their living, and that is because it's what they believe in. That is their world. That's their faith.
So in their area, they like if you're married, you sort of become like a person proper in society.
That's status, yes.
Status, okay.
Because polygamy was the notion then, was the custom. So
that means I'm wondering if people got married just so that they didn't have.
Okay. Well, you get married, otherwise you will get it when you cross over. So there's Nagananga. Then if the person is married, crossing into the world of the dead, there's Rabuyalo, the slayer of the spirits. The slayer of the spirits, Rabuyalo, challenges the soul to a battle.
Oh, one-on-one.
Yeah. The person has to prove his bravery. Again, like with the Norse mythology, battle, valor, strength, these are the values of society. So the person, you have to prove your worth. You can get past. You have to outwit Rabuyalo. And you continue on, and there are two goddesses who try and mislead the soul. So the path from when a person dies, the path to the world of the dead takes 100 days and 100 nights.
It is so hard.
It is hard. Life is a battle, and also death is also a battle. But that's how they viewed society. Nothing comes easy. That reality was already with the ancestors. Life is not a
Walk in the park.
walk in the park. You struggle, you prove your worth. You also prove your worth in the world of the dead.
I like how, like you keep saying, how aspects of the culture in the living carry over to the. It's basically a mirror, and that's what they believe in. So it's really.
It's the other way around. The values of the spiritual has to come out into the living world, and society is structured along there. That's where the priests come in. They dictate and they say these are the values, these are the qualities, these are the things that must be observed.
Okay, well, that's a really nice dive into the afterworld. So if I was to pull back, I want to talk about a bit more about the priests in the village, like how you were saying there's the high priest, and then you have the individual
Sub priests.
the sub priests. What are some cultural practices that were dictated by the priest? What stuff did they say? You're describing about how they pointed out certain stuff to harvest and whatnot. Could you go in a bit more detail about how the priests advised day-to-day life?
Think of it like a weatherman. The weatherman gives a forecast and they work according to that forecast. Sometimes the difference is the weatherman's forecast in today's terms gives a forecast for up to days, say 7 to 14 days.
Right.
Whereas the priest gives a forecast for like a season, which is 2 months, 3 months, a while. So that's a forecast. And people arrange themselves according to that. So to give an example, the god of harvest in Eastern Vitilevu is called Ratu Maimbulu.
The god.
God of harvest. His chief priest
Right. Okay.
does not drink Yangona, and he lives in silence because he just has to mirror his god, the deity. So the god
Sorry,
of
if I could just put a pause there. Why does this god have a Ratu title? I thought Ratu was for chiefs.
Yeah, he was a chief,
Oh, he was a chief.
and then he became deified as a deity,
Okay.
Ratu Maimbulu.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's the only Ratu, the only deity with Ratu. But he became the god of harvest. So the god of harvest would come like I mentioned before. There are only certain times when the function, the purpose comes to the fore, comes to the surface. Ratu Maimbulu, his purpose and function will come to the surface round about November, December. In the traditional lunar calendar, it was a certain time of certain species and fruits from trees. Why November? Why December? Because this was the time in the southern hemisphere which was coincided with the springtime.
Right. Nice and hot and.
So he would be the one that would inspect the gardens and make sure. So people made sure they did not pollute the land and the waterways. So Ratu Maimbulu would come and inspect. If anything was out of order, the harvest and the bounty for the following year would not happen, and people would have droughts. And would have anything that would prevent them having a bounty. So people were ensured that they lived according to the regulations prescribed by the priest.
And it's so strict, eh?
It was so strict, there was no pollution.
Right.
So round about January, the inspection is over. Well, even when the god of harvest, Ratu Maimbulu, was doing his inspection, there was no noise expected in the clan. So they'd have their ndalo and their ubi plantations. Kids were taken away to another part of the land to stay away. So the crying, which is noisy, does not offend the god. If there has been warfare going on, there's a pause. Ceasefire.
Really? Even that?
Even there.
Food comes before fighting, eh?
Security, because the deity is now visiting. Whatever ceasefire, whatever hostility is suspended. So, in saying so, when before Ratu Maimbulu visits around about November, December, in honor of him not liking noise and not liking conflict, the people also have to be quiet and they have to begin their reconciliation, because their spirit, if it's in conflict, the god Ratu Maimbulu can pick it up. Yes, he's coming to inspect the land and the waterways, but you also have to be at peace with one another.
As in within the clan.
Reconcile. So, which is why, to ensure that the clan, because in honor of Ratu Maimbulu's wishes, they put in place reconciliation rituals from the younger to the older, and on and so forth, until the entire tribe, the entire clan is reconciled. So the reconciling is taking place when the god is visiting. By the time the god finishes his inspection, his chief priest will then make the announcement. And he makes an announcement by making noise, having the announcement and do the whoop, the kaila, etc.
And that's sort of like the signal, like all good.
All good. That is why, even today in Fiji, our New Year is always distinct, because our New Year, that kaila, that water splash, it's the practice from those. The god has departed
And given the thumbs up.
Given the thumbs up, we now can celebrate. We can now make noise.
Wow, that's a nice, interesting callback to stuff that we do today, with the whole wetting and
Yes.
the
The powdering, etc. The celebration is very distinct in Fiji because it dates back to those days of spirituality. So this is now, today's January. After the celebration is done, it comes the next lunar month, the harvest. So once the celebration is done, then they bring their fruits, the one that they've set aside to be their offering as first fruits
right.
to the god of harvest. That's what we call a hula I sewu.
Okay, so.
The sewu is the offering of the first fruit.
And so after they offer it and they bring it, and the priest.
It's to thank the god for visiting and for blessing the bounty. So they give back the portion to the priest. Today, it's still done in the Methodist Church. It's taken to the church. It's a
Carryover.
over from that practice. That's just an example to show the god of harvest. And after that, the god of harvest goes back, retreats to his cave, and waits again for his annual visit.
One aspect that I really find fascinating is the aspect of reconciliation and how that's tied into, like, everyone should be at peace with each other before before the god of harvest comes over. The benefit of that ensures that there's no bad blood that carries over into the new year.
Yeah.
So you always, the community is always working to ensure that everyone's good with each other, to a certain degree, to make sure that there's general peace.
So imagine it this way. That's the first fruit is the offering from the land. Switch it another way. The fish folk, they ensure that their first bounty from the sea, the catch, is also done without conflict. So working backwards, they put in place their reconciliation, and this is where the taboos come. This is where the reconciliation, the making peace with one another.
So it's really interwoven to all aspects of Fijian society.
Yes. For those who venerate Ratu Maimbulu. In Western Fiji, it's a goddess, Lewatu Momo, similar practices. The god, the deity is different, but
The practices.
are similar. Always reconcile before you do an undertaking. Fast forward to today. This is why, before any game, players must be.
Rugby?
Yeah. They don't know. They think it's a Christian aspect. No, it goes back to those days where, for the physical accomplishment to be guaranteed, you have to be aligned and be at peace in the spiritual level. Whether it's rugby, whether it's exams, whether it's whatever, building a house, we must be aligned and at peace with the spirit world. Because the spirituality of those days believed if the spiritual world is unbalanced, that unbalance will seep out into the physical world.
To the very tightly woven together, spirituality and the physical
Yes.
realm. And that's really fascinating. All right. One other aspect of spirituality that we haven't discussed is I'm curious about the Kava and how, to us in general today, it's a pastime sort of thing, something that we drink to relax and to catch up with friends and family. We still use it in our traditional ceremonies.
Yeah.
But how different was it in Fiji BC? How different was the usage? How the aspects of it? How it was made? What are the big differences?
There are some deities who don't drink kava. So let me use an example in a tribe. Because this tribe, first of all, chiefs are believed to be the avatar of the unseen deity. So if the deity craves for kava, it will be offered to the chief in the morning and offered in the evening as an offering. That's it. If the deity craves blood, that's the war god. They have to have a sacrifice. They have to have. So whatever the deity being worshipped craves or expects to be offered as sacrifice, that is what the people will do. So whether it's offering of a maiden, offering of a human, or offering of angon, or offering of whatever, it is done to placate the god. And then you wonder, okay. So those who are cannibal, yes, because their god just demanded blood. Not because they lacked food. No, they had to make sure they appeased. They offered. Their daily quota of offering was always there.
And so, of course, this varied.
It varied. There were those who lived on bread. They offered bread. There was whatever. It's very, very different.
So, with regards to like Kava.
Kava.
Yeah.
Again, like I mentioned, the god of harvest, he did not drink angon.
Oh, that's surprising.
So his priest never took angon.
Like, how was it mixed back then? How did they create? How did they?
Chewed.
They chewed it.
Yeah. It was the green plant that was chewed. The one that we're drinking in Fiji today is sun-dried. That was introduced by the Girimites.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yep.
So are you saying that we chewed it and then that was it? That was our.
Okay. They chewed. Remember, they were chewing. And it was not chewed into a fine, it was still bulky, still large pieces. This is when they would use, if they're in the interior, they would use certain vines and then just and pour water, and then the word is bali.
Massage?
No, bali is like when you
squeeze.
When you knead a dough flour.
Right. Okay.
So that action, this action is called bali. If they're at the coast, they'll use the vow strands to Bali. I think in the whole of Fiji, Kandavu still retains the old practice of mixing kava using the vow in bowl. That's what they call it. So chiu is large dregs, still large pieces of wood. By the time the water is added, the chemical process would make this more lethal.
Ooh.
That's the chemistry. They knew it then. They knew that saliva reacts with starch. I mean, nobody told them, in their corner, you have this starch, you have this component. They just knew somehow when you chewed, it reacted with this and created. What was the result? Was nothing salivary, but a chemical reaction. And when you add the water, it just increases the power, the potency. So you drink one cup, you hit that kaleidoscope. And that is the world of the spiritual God. You enter into that. So
the act of actually drinking kava was for the purpose of
tuning yourself in the spiritual world, and that is why the kava consumption then was only confined to the chief and the priest,
the executive
the
community.
executive.
So it was something very sacred.
Kava.
If they drank kava, so there's something very sacred, very like only
not common, not done to the common. not open to the rest below the ranks.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. So the type of grog that we drink now, that is pounded, that was brought on by the
curing, drying in the sun.
Yeah.
Is introduced through the indentured laborers.
Oh, okay.
They came from a culture where things could be commodified. They sun-dried and put into jars the mangoes, the chilies.
Right.
Preserve so that it could be commodified and made available and it may be sold. So they did that too with the Cava.
Oh, that's really handy. So I guess the Cava that we know these days is definitely a lot different from back then, as well as who drank it, and how often and for what purpose.
I think one of these companies in Fiji that makes the instant Cava, they use the green plant, and they use some process to process it into powder and make it instant, which is why I've heard from those who drink the instant Cava, it's potent. It is potent because it still has the traditional green,
the kick,
but not potent where it's chewed and the saliva acts on it. Certain parts of Namosi, once they had Cava, being chewed, and when the traders, when the missionaries came, they thought it's unhygienic, and they forbade it. They did not know the chemistry. They thought, hey, not dirty people, yucky. Why are you chewing this? Stop it! It's unhygienic.
Yeah.
If they had paused a while and asked, do you have diseases of the mouth? No. Dental problems is not an issue. Oral disease was not an issue. But the people knew the chemistry behind it. That's why they chewed. They did not chew. Okay, let's just give this one a headache and chew. No. It was done with, they knew from hundreds of years of living experience. This was how it would give this process.
Well, that's has been a very good insight. I am actually lost for words right now.
The Cava became used commonly during the colonial period. In the colonial period, towns were still being established. People were still living in the clans, in the villages. Those who managed to escape, first of all, Suva was the first urban center. Those who came from the islands, they had pockets of communities around Suva. Nambua is one, Turaki is another. Then, because they were away from the village regulations, they then decided to, what was made taboo, let us smack it and go to town with it.
Oh, so
that's where the Cava then spread to become a common social drink. Oh. It was a rebellion by those who came away from the village. So they went to town with the Cava. And ever since it has become a social drink. But it was a sacred, spiritual drink then.
So I guess we have those rebels to thank for now that we can partake in the holy drink.
Yes.
Well, with that, I think we'll call this episode to a close. That was very illuminating with aspects of spirituality in the old days of how ingrained it was in the society and how it was embedded in every aspect of society. I also like that bit about the reconciliation. That's really kind of heartwarming. That's one of the aspects of the old Fijian past that we don't know about.
Yeah, because the ones who are writing, they think that we're still savages. We are not capable of higher emotions and attributes.
And also, like the Underworld, I really like the discussion of the because again, it's not an aspect of old Fijian culture that we talk about or we even know about. And even you've mentioned that that was only of one written aspect of one particular region of Fiji. Yeah. I guess the fun is in people, if you're from your village, now would be a good time to ask your village elders or your parents or whatever, what's their version of the underworld? Because it'll be different for each region. And finally, we got the Kava, which is very surprising to
Yes.
find out that how different it was back then.
Yes.
And thanks to those rebels,
Yes.
we get to drink it as common people. Well, thank you very much for that chat, Mr. Sevudredre. We'll finish off this episode. Fiji BC was brought to you by the kind sponsors of Weta Fiji, who have given us this room to shoot in. Thank you very much. As well as the camera and equipment were provided by Dave Lavaki of First Fighter. Thank you very much to him. He gave the lights and camera. If you want to keep up to date with what's going to happen next, feel free to subscribe with the links at the bottom of this video, the various social media links, and subscribe to the newsletter so you can see what's coming up next. In the next episode, I believe we're going to talk about the arts, which is something sort of near and dear to my heart, the arts of Fiji and how we did it back then. Okay, well with that, Naka sir, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Naka.
Lo, lo,